Hi, everyone. Welcome to Friendship Circle's Evening of Inspiration. We are going to go ahead and get started with our evening because we don't want to waste a minute. And while people are joining, we have a few things that are going to go before the Estrins speaking. So for any of you who are not so familiar with Friendship Circle, we partner teenage volunteers with kids with special needs to create friendship and promote inclusion. We have this event every year. It's annual. It's called the Evening of Inspiration because that's exactly what we hope that you take away from tonight. We usually have a speaker that is in some way, shape, or form a member of or touched by the special needs community, but the messages are universal. They give us hope, they give us strength, and we should walk away from tonight feeling a little bit better about being here in this world. So on the note of Friendship Circle, we also have another annual event called Walk for Friendship, and it was a blast last year, and we have a brief recap video to show you now because it's already time to mark your calendars for Sunday, September 4th for this year's walk.
For friendship.
A good day, no matter what comes down my way. Today's gonna be a good day, no matter what comes down my way. 'Cause I've got something burning inside, and I've already made up my mind. Today's gonna be a good day, no matter what comes down my way. Today's gonna be a good day, no matter what comes down my way. 'Cause I've got something burning inside, and I've already made up my mind. Today's the day I'll be okay. Sunshine clears the clouds away. Today's the day I'm gonna say, you keep tomorrow, I'll take today. Today's the day I'll be okay. Sunshine clears the clouds away. Today's the day I'm gonna pray to keep on singing as the music plays. היום יהיה יום טוב עם כל מה שיבוא. היום יהיה יום טוב עם כל מה שיבוא. כי אש בוערת בקרבי והשמחה בתוך ליבי. היום יהיה יום טוב עם כל מה שיבוא. היום יהיה יום טוב עם כל מה שיבוא. כי אש בוערת בקרבי והשמחה בתוך ליבי. זה היום, זה המקום, שמיים נפתחו פתאום. זה היום, עמוק לנשום, הסוף מחר כבר יש היום. זה היום, זה המקום, שמיים נפתחו פתאום. זה היום, אני אזרום, בואו ונשיר את הפזמון. Can't leave it till I'm on my way. All I've got is just today. This one day I won't give away. With a smile I'm halfway there. Say what they say, but I don't care. Can't get caught up in despair. All I need is just a prayer.
Okay, so like I mentioned, Sunday, September 4th, we'd love to see you come on out. It's open to the entire community. It raises funds for our programming, but most importantly, it's for individuals of all abilities. It's a truly inclusive event, and we're really passionate about it, and it's a blast. So we hope you'll join us. Now, usually when we do this in person, we get a chance to thank all of our incredible teen volunteers in person up on a stage. Obviously, in this medium, we can't do that, but we do owe a huge debt of gratitude to our amazing teenage volunteers. So thank you for all that you do. You make more of a difference than you know. We are going to hear from one of them and also from a mother of a not so young child anymore, actually, over bar mitzvah boy who's been with us for a few years now. So just to talk a little bit about what Friendship Circle means to them and the impact it's had on their lives. So take it away, Miriam Ballavander.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for having me. My name is Miriam Bellavander, and my son Gabriel has been involved with the Friendship Circle organization for over 10 years now. He's currently 17 years old and he's finishing his junior year in high school. Gabriel is on an autistic spectrum, and as such, social interactions are difficult for him. One of the most challenging things for Gabriel was, and still is, interacting with peers in a meaningful way and making friends. And this is where wonderful people with Friendship Circle come in. They help parents and children such as Gabriel to have those meaningful interactions, and they find a volunteer child match or of similar age to pair with a child with special needs. And those kids interact and form friendship. So Gabriel was around 7 years old when he got his first friend, Noah, and they had a great relationship for a few years, and after which his friend started college. And then Gabriel was paired with his current friend, Aaron, with whom they have been together ever since. So Aaron would come to our house once a week, and they would have a lot of fun playing together. They attended each other's bar mitzvahs and special events. This year, Aaron started college, but the kids keep in regular touch and do FaceTime calls every week with each other. They really are became true friends over the years, even outside Friendship Circle. And this is what this program does for kids like Gabriel, helps find those lifelong friendships. Throughout the years, we as a family enjoyed our long-lasting relationship with Friendship Circles. Gabriel has participated in many events that the organization puts together for special needs children. He loves Jewish holidays, and he loves Friendship Circles, Hanukkah bowling parties and activities. He participated in Purim parties and various volunteer community events. Passover at the rabbi's house is always a highlight for Gabriel, and he enjoys being involved with the local community. Gabriel also attended the special winter camp that Friendship Circle organized for the kids like him. While sometimes it's challenging to find appropriate programs by our local park district, Friendship Circles always comes through with something that would make Gabriel's school breaks more interesting. We participate annually in the Walk for Friendship that was just mentioned here, and Gabriel looks forward to the walk every year. The mom, I'm really grateful to Rabbi Zelik and Basti to have them in our lives, and wanted again to thank Friendship Circle for enriching the lives of children with special needs. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing those words. Our current volunteer, Eliza Rosen, is unable to be with us in person tonight, so she recorded a message for us that she wants to share what Friendship Circle means to her.
Hi, my name is Eliza Rosen, and I volunteer for Talmud Torah Friendship Circle of Illinois. It's such an incredible organization that helps children who are not privileged or fortunate enough to go to Jewish school for all various reasons, help them learn Torah and Judaic studies. It's something I greatly enjoy doing and look forward to every Sunday. It starts at 9:45 a.m. and ends at 12, and I go there to start my morning off, and it's such a fulfilling way to start my morning. The program runs as if first in the beginning of the day we have these little books for Aleph Beit, so they each read it, and they feel so proud when they complete a book. And then Ms. Moskowitz, who runs the program so beautifully, gives them a medal each time they finish it, so they feel so good about themselves and so fulfilled and so happy. Then we have an incredible music teacher who comes every day, who we daven with the kids, which is so special, and I'm so incredibly thankful that I get the opportunity to help them do this, and they just daven and sing, and it's such an exciting thing. Then after that, Mrs. Moskowitz always reads them a story about what kind of going on this week in the Parsha, or if there's any Jewish holidays coming up, what's it about, what's the significance of it. So she reads in a fun little children's book, which is so cute. All kids enjoy story time. I know my kid personally does. And then after that, she runs a project based on what the book read, and it's a way for the kids to show their creative skills and have fun with Judaism while also learning. It's such a great chesed opportunity. I'm so grateful that I get to volunteer and be a part of this incredible organization. Just so well run, so well done. It brings, when the kids know the answers, it brings a smile to my face. It puts a smile to their face. I hope that I could be a mentor to them and help them with anything they need, and that anything they need, they know they can come to me and just help them do Judaism throughout it all, and just learn to love Torah as much as Mrs. Moskowitz and I could put on the kids.
Thank you, Eliza. Really appreciate those kind words that you shared about Talmud Torah and the dedication that you have been your dedication throughout this whole year for Talmud Torah, together with all your friends and all the volunteers in Talmud Torah and all the other programs. Now we find ourselves in the time of Spiras HaOmer, and this is an appropriate time for this event, especially when we reflect how the even though notwithstanding the challenges that Rabbi Akiva had and the fact that the 24,000 students that he had amassed during his years as a teacher, and then from Pesach till Lag BaOmer, that this epidemic where all his students passed away, but he wasn't hindered by that, and he took the strength to rebuild. And we celebrate this day of Lag BaOmer, even though it's, if you look at it in a way that he lost all his students, it's a very terrible destruction. It's a terrible tragedy. But from this day going forward, he, instead of being in despair, he looked, how could he pick up the pieces? How could he rebuild? And indeed, he had only 5 students. And from these 5 students, he literally rebuilt the Torah knowledge, and much of the Talmud is the discussions of these students and their students and so on. So it's humbling for me to participate in this event. And I want to thank Mandy for arranging everything. And it's a big honor for us to have the Estrins here today and share with us their life experience. And I'm sure I will learn a lot, and I'm hopeful that each one of you will also be able to take away a nice lesson from this. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mandy, who's going to reintroduce the Estrins with the full proper introductions. Thank you for having me.
You're always welcome at Friendship Circle, Rabbi Thalik. Okay, I'm going to do actually a short, brief intro for them, and they can introduce themselves more fully if they like. We're very excited to have them here. This is the main event, and there's been a lot of buildup and excitement leading to hear the actual story of Nissi, the ongoing story, Baruch Hashem. So just a reminder, the Estrins are kind enough to stick around for a Q&A after their presentation. If you have questions while they're speaking, you can send them to me in the chat, and I will pose them to them after. And then if you're brave and you want to ask them yourselves, once they're done speaking, we'll open it up to anyone who also wants to ask. And we have an autographed copy of their book to raffle off at the end of the presentation. And I even heard that they will personalize it for you. So another reason to be excited. So Rabbi Eli and Chai Estrin are going to speak to us about their nothing less than miraculous journey with their child Nissi, and I'm going to hand it over and let them take it away.
Thank you, Mandy, and it's truly a pleasure to be with you in Chicago, or as much as we can be. Here we are suffering in Miami, so it's good to get a little bit of a wind or something like that. So my wife and I, we directed Chabad at University of Washington for 13 years, and this story begins there. In Seattle. And the story goes back about 6.5 years ago. So we're going to move from Sfiras HaOmer into Hanukkah, which was actually, technically speaking, I guess, where we found out about the diagnosis. And that's a lot of where the story began. But with that, I want to start with some of the ideas that got us through the story. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with those ideas, but at the same time, I would like you to consider those ideas as you're hearing the story. So there's 3 ideas I want to focus on. Number 1 is the fact that we know that God can do absolutely anything. So God works within nature most of the time. That's what we see. Nature is God's system, his mechanisms that as he works with the world. And then there's also the holidays that we celebrate of Hanukkah and Pesach and all the other holidays that are beyond nature. And, that's really a basic part of Judaism, that we recognize that God can do whatever he wants. He doesn't always do what we want, but we know that he can. So that's number 1. And number 2 is the idea that a body and a soul are a cosmic union, an idea that's really beyond our comprehension. And that's really, really important because oftentimes, especially one of the primary concepts of Friendship Circle and where Friendship Circle started and its spiritual roots are in this idea, because every single human being has something special. And if you look at the external facets, well, you see this person is smarter than that person, so this person must be more worthwhile, so to speak, God forbid. And that leads people to very, very negative places. On the other hand, when you look at every human being as a godly soul, and every moment of life as a godly experience, because that's body and soul being together, and it completely changes everything. So that's a second idea I'm sure all of you are familiar with, but it's an important idea in this whole story. And the third concept is that we have a mission, and mission is not always something that's enjoyable. It's not always something that is something that we asked for. Oftentimes we have missions thrust on us in life that we really don't want. But the fact is that any experience that we go through is a godly mission. And the purpose of that mission is to try to uncover gems within it and uncover spiritual lifelines and experiences that we can draw out. It's like a cosmic game of a treasure hunt or something like that. That's really what it's all. But those three ideas are concepts. As you hear of the insanity of our story, you'll be able to understand what we were thinking and how we were trying to get through it. So that Hanukkah, we of course had our menorah lighting on campus, and my wife was 6 months pregnant with our 6th child. Now, our first child was also a miracle child, as were the in-between 4, but in a completely different way. The first child he was born at 26 weeks. He was 1 pound 15 ounces. But that's really not much of a story, thank God, because now he's, in yeshiva and calling us every week, asking us to give him money. That's basically, so, everything's good. But the important thing about that story, besides the fact that we appreciate it very, very much, and rumor has it that he's taller than me now, is no longer 1 pound 15 ounces. Just a rumor. But we met a certain doctor, a Jewish doctor, in that experience, who, as you will hear, is part of this story as well. And for the purposes of protecting his own safety, I think, we're going to call him Dr. Ralph. So as a result of that original pregnancy, my wife was relegated or condemned to a high-risk pregnancy for the next several pregnancies. And when we got to pregnancy number 6, we really kind of finished with it, because thank God the other kids were born healthy and happy and everybody was good. So we're ready to move out of the high-risk world, which is very, very negative. So we were seeing midwives that were attached to the hospital, and my wife went for this ultrasound, and she called me afterwards and she said, I think there's something wrong with the baby's heart. So she had seen on the ultrasound, they're spending a lot of time around the baby's heart, and that extra time, and without saying anything and saying, oh, the doctor will call you. Well, thank you very much. None of us want that little message, the doctor will call you. Everybody wants to hear just everything's fine. And so she called me. I was on campus getting ready for the menorah lighting. She went to go get some supplies. And then I got a call from one of the midwives, and she said, is your wife there? I said, no, but I understand there's something wrong with the baby's heart. And she kind of went back and forth. And then finally she said, yeah, there are some serious problems. I said, okay, is this baby viable? And she didn't want to answer that question. But I pushed her into a corner, not physically. I was on the phone, just to clarify. And she eventually said, based on my understanding of the situation, I'm not a doctor, but I would say, no, I don't think so. So I elected to withhold that information from my wife, because we had a program. I figured, she'll find out about it soon enough. But at the program, I spoke about the first idea that I just mentioned to you before, the fact that the menorah represents the fact that God did miracles in those days and does miracles nowadays as well. And it's just a matter of whether God decides he wants to do the miracle. And there are elements of us trying to open ourselves up to it by keeping that relationship with God, and by doing the mitzvot that we need to do, and to try to create a positive pathway for those miracles. But the fact of the matter is that this is what we believe. And that was very much a pep talk for me myself. That was really where it was coming from. And then afterwards, I told my wife what's going on. We called the midwife, and she said, okay, we've got a doctor's appointment in a week where we're going to do a full assessment of the fetus. We'll be able to get a really good idea of what's going on and make a decision what to do next. So at the next doctor's appointment, it was a complete assessment. And then they brought us into a room, 3-hour assessment. So it was very, very thorough. And then they brought us into another room where there was nothing but a table, and on the table was a box of tissues. The assumption is that everybody in the room obviously has a cold. And 3 people came in, 2 doctors, cardiologist, and a prenatal, OB, and a social worker. A social worker was there to take notes. She took extensive notes of those conversations, and we actually have them today. And the cardiologist started speaking first, and she said, there is a range of heart defects, and they can be as small as a hole that closes soon after the baby is born, and they can go very, very far off into the Netherlands, shall we say. Not the country, the concept. And she said, this baby has what we would say extreme or complex cardiac disease. There are 12 defects that are considered critical and need immediate surgery. This baby has 3 of the 12. And so we'll just briefly go through them. Number 1, the baby only has a single ventricle. He only has a right ventricle. He does not have a left ventricle. Number 2 and number 3 are related to each other, and they're bigger problems than having only half a heart. And those are that pulmonary atresia. So that means that there was no pulmonary valve, no way for the heart to be able to pump blood to the lungs. And the pulmonary veins that carry oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart went into the liver. So practically speaking, she said, we don't know if this baby can survive birth. If the baby can survive birth, does survive birth, then we'll need to get him into surgery. There's a maximum of him being able to survive 6 hours, maybe 12 hours at the very, very, very max. And that the baby can, without surgery, this baby will be able to survive. So for me, that was fantastic news. I was like, great, you said surgery. That's fantastic. All we need is something to fight with. All we need is a weapon. Just get it and we'll go. We'll do whatever we can. And then the rest of it's up to God. It's not up to us. And then the other doctor started talking. She said, well, we also assessed the rest of the baby, and we're finding all sorts of other problems. The esophagus seems to be either fused to the trachea, or they possibly don't reach the stomach, or we can't even find the stomach on the ultrasound. So considering all those things, we don't think he has a functional GI system. And considering the intensity of the cardiac problems alongside the intensity of the GI problems, there's really nothing we can do. So we said, thanks so much for running us over with a truck. It was very sweet of you. We said goodbye and basically headed home and tried to decide, okay, what do we do here? So Judaism, of course, has an approach where, number 1, based on that first idea that we just discussed, you don't give up. It's just that concept is just not in our, that's not in our psyche. That's not in our the way we deal with things. You are facing something. So the question is, what do you do? It's not, all right, it's over. So number 1 is the spiritual things that we need to do. First of all, the mindsets. The mindsets, number 1, are going to be that we will do whatever we can to be there if God wants to give us a miracle. And then after that, there are certain practical things that we need to try to do, both spiritual practical things as well as physical practical things. And we started to applying those things as well. So spiritual was, for example, one of the many things we did was we checked our mezuzot. And many people know that having a mezuzah and a kosher mezuzah specifically has to do with protection of the home and has a relationship with what's going on. And in fact, one of the mezuzot on our house, the basement of our house, actually was not a mezuzah that should have been up because we rented out our basement to non-Jews, so it shouldn't have been there. but the mezuzah had two flaws in it. And the two flaws were in the word binchem, which means your son, and levavchem, which means your heart. So that was pretty intense when we saw that. So we were kind of excited, like, okay, great. Now that we fixed the problem, let's see the miracles roll in. But we didn't realize that, these things take a little bit of time. So it wasn't a 1, 2, 3 fix. But along with that, the Lubavitcher Rebbe gave people advice in terms of dealing with medical crisis and how to deal with things. And one of the things was get a second opinion. So we reached out to Boston Children's, and they gave us their opinion, which was that surgery would be futile, which we were not very happy about. So then after that, the next piece of advice was to find a doctor who was a friend. And here's where we reached out to this doctor of my oldest son, this neonatologist. And of course, there are several mistakes that we made here, because as a neonatologist, we thought that he has a broader perspective on everything. And he thought that as well. But as you'll see in the story, he was, shall we say, exaggerating his own.
Thought he knew everything.
Yeah, he thought he knew everything. that's a kind way of saying it. But we thought that he was a friend. It wasn't a close friend by any means whatsoever. But I said, can we talk to you about this? He said, absolutely. We sat down. We said, listen, here's the situation. The baby has pulmonary atresia, total anomalous pulmonary venous return. He has single ventricle. They don't know his GI situation. Considering all these problems, we would like to figure out an option to be able to try to save this kid's life. And he said, listen, this is really, really terrible, because even if the baby does survive, his quality of life will be virtually nil. I said, stop right there. Quality of life is not something I'm concerned with, because quality of life is completely subjective. It's totally dependent on the person judging, as opposed to the actual idea of body and soul. Body and soul is a completely different story. We don't know why a body and soul are put together. We don't know why a conscious body and soul are together. We don't know why an unconscious body and soul are together. These are mystical ideas. These are godly ideas. They're not for us. Our job is to protect the body and soul. And we went back and forth on that. And I thought he understood what I was saying. And I said, would you be willing to get involved with the case? Because he was involved with the hospital, both Children's Hospital, where any surgery would be done, as well as the University of Washington Medical Center, where where the baby was going to be born. And so we knew that he was involved with both. So could you advocate for us so that we can get the right doctors, we can get the right treatment and all that kind of thing? He said, sure, you have to give me permission. I said, no problem. And he looked at the scans, called me back a couple of weeks later and said, there's nothing to talk about. This is really not a good situation. In the meantime, we were going to doctor's visits every single week, and they were, shall we say, not exactly the most enjoyable experiences we've ever had, because we'd go in, the OB would say, everything's fine, mom, you're fine, the baby's fine. And then there was this Jewish social worker there who would say, have you called the Chevra Kadisha yet? Have you called the Jewish Burial Society? Have you made his plans for his last moments? And I can be a little bit sarcastic sometimes, I think. And I've made comments to her like, listen, you want to speak to the grave diggers, you're welcome to, but don't do it on my behalf. It was just like, but it was really, it was exhausting. Exhausting is not even a word to describe it. It was soul destroying every single time to go into this doctor's appointment and to get crushed. And it would take us several days to kind of come out of that every single time. So this went on from 9 weeks from when they got the diagnosis till the baby was born. And then, of course, Dr. Ralph started getting on our case as well. He's like, well, we need to make decisions for the last moments. And I'm like, oh, now you too. It was pretty awful. But eventually I felt that we needed to get some kind of guidance to be able to know what our halachic responsibilities were. Halacha is not just Jewish law. It also tells us what we're supposed to be doing in any circumstance. What does God want from us? So we don't have like a direct line call, 911 and say, hey, can I speak to God? It doesn't really work that way. I mean, you can try. I haven't, so I don't know if it works. I wouldn't think so. What we do know in terms of our connection with God is it works through Jewish law, and Jewish law tells us what God wants in any particular circumstance. And so with regards to a child that is not supposed to live long in this life, I needed to find out what are my responsibilities, what are my prerogatives, what should I do? So I asked one of our friends, a family rabbi, so to speak, Rabbi Mordechai Farkash. I asked him to come and meet with Dr. Ralph and I to have a conversation about what our responsibilities were. And so we met, and the first thing the rabbi wants to know is, are you absolutely sure that what you're seeing is real, that you've got the right diagnosis? And Rabbi and Dr. Ralph said, well, listen, we see it on the screens. It's quite clear. This is what we see. I said, well, how do you know the prognosis is correct? He said, listen, practically speaking, there's no pulmonary flow. So the ability for the baby to be able to breathe for an extended amount of time is severely compromised. So we don't know if he'll be able to survive birth. If he does survive birth, he probably won't be able to survive the testing that they do after birth. If he survives that, he won't be able to survive the ambulance ride from the University of Washington Medical Center to Children's Hospital, which, as Mandy knows, is not a very long drive. And if he survives that, he said these words, he said he will definitely die on the operating table. And if somehow he does not die on the operating table, he will be a vegetable till he dies soon afterwards. So Rabbi Farkash said, so he's telling me that there's no medical way of dealing with all of these, what they call constellation of problems. Rabbi Farkash did not use the term constellation of problems. The doctors did, but he said, that's correct. There's nothing to do. He said, well, if there's nothing to do, there's nothing really, you have no responsibility other than, you have to obviously take care of the baby at the time. But that means two things that you need to know. Number one, if the baby's intubated, then you may not pull the oxygen from him. Number one. Number two is you must feed him. Can't starve him to death. I said, okay, thank you for the ad perspective. I turned to Dr. Ralph. I said, I want you to prepare as if this baby can survive. I want a plan. I don't want a death plan here. I want a birth plan. And so what I would like to do is whatever we can possibly do that if this child can survive, I want to be there to be able to kind of grab those opportunities. So he said, that's actually no problem because we can give him a dose of a medicine called prostaglandin. So there's a small heart hole between the heart and lungs called the patent ductus arteriosus that usually closes right after birth. And prostaglandin will keep that hole open, so that way there'll be some kind of blood flow between the heart and lungs while we do testing, and that way we can do the testing. I said, great, thanks so much. So we agreed to have my wife induced on a Monday morning in order to be able to have, he told us to have the best radiologists there, to have the full staff there, and to make sure that we had everybody there. And that Monday, February 8th, 2016, we came to the hospital actually the night before. It was very, very intense walking into that hospital. Every step was heavier than the next. But then the next morning, we started the induction, and eventually it was Erev Rosh Chodesh. It was not Rosh Chodesh. It was Erev Rosh Chodesh, and that's important. We'll get there. This was Chaf Tes Shvat, 29th of Shvat. And that night was Rosh Chodesh Adar. And Adar is, of course, a month that's referred to as Mazale Bare, and it has healthy luck, so to speak. Spiritual concepts going on there. Adar also, like this month of Iyar, stands for Ani Hashem Rofecha, I am God, your healer. So yes, part of my hopes were to get him into Rosh Chodesh to kind of tap into those spiritual energies if possible. That was what I was hoping for. But 12:45, the baby was born, and the first thing was the baby cried. Oh, there we go. All right. We were very busy on February 10th. Baby cried. So obviously there was some kind of breathing going on. That was exciting. And they immediately suctioned him. They gave him the prostaglandin right away. And about an hour later, they handed the baby back to me. And Dr. Ralph said, this baby is not going to survive to see sunset. So in February in Seattle, sunset is sometime around 4:30. So he was basically saying, look, you've got a couple of hours here. This is what you've got. In my head, I thought two things. I said, first of all, God gives permission to doctors to heal, not to predict. That's a classic quote from the third Rebbe of Chabad, and it's really, really, really important because most doctors think that they are prognosticians when they're actually healers, and they don't realize that. But that went through my head, and I thought to myself, come on, kid, show this doctor he's not God, make it into sunset, make it past sunset. Just make it past sunset. And then, of course, to get into the Rosh Chodesh as well. That was all part of those feelings that we're hoping to get to. Well, the doctor left, and we're holding this baby. He had already taken off the nasal prongs, and we're just holding him. And he's every so often he's turning a slight kind of color purple, if you can see that now, or that kind of color. And as he was, we'd massage him kind of desperately or something like that. A very chill baby, very, very chill. There was a nurse who went and snuck a pacifier from the NICU. She had to steal it from the NICU because in the labor and delivery ward of that particular hospital, they don't allow pacifiers. They're forbidden. And we're holding the baby. Well, 4 o'clock comes, 5 o'clock comes, 6 o'clock comes, and the baby's still alive. So I came running over to one of the nurses. I said, listen, I understand the diagnosis. I understand the situation is not good. But if you look at the kid clinically, he's doing great. And if he's doing great, maybe he should be a candidate for a surgery. And the nurse went to go get somebody, and she called a charge nurse. And the charge nurse came with she had an attitude. She was like, well, if you want to go to Children's Hospital, you need to go right now. I said, well, what's the plan? She goes, well, they'll do the same thing they did this morning. I said, well, that's not going to help. So what other things can we do? She goes, well, there's really nothing else to do. I said, well, why would I want to go to Children's Hospital if there's nothing to do there? She said, well, that's your choice. I said, well, not really. She says, well, you have to make your decision right now. I said, was there a cardiologist? And we were not getting a response to there not being a cardiologist. And it just wasn't coming out. And it seemed like it was turning into an ego thing between me and somebody else there, one of the other this doctor in particular. So it was kind of frustrating because you're trying to deal with, on the one hand, the heaviness of the situation. You want to try to be, you want to be realistic about how what the situation was. But at the same time, you're trying to advocate for your kid and you're not getting anywhere. Well, being told that there's nothing to do at Children's Hospital, and the other option is basically for the kid to die in your hands. The question is, okay, the kid's going to die in your hands running around the hospital hallways, searching for nothing, or you're just going to hold the baby and try to give the baby as much love as possible. So, considering that, we basically, I don't know if it was a choice.
Just had a baby.
And my wife just had it. That's a good point.
And I just had a baby, so I couldn't go with him to Seattle Children's. So it was sort of like, if there's no purpose, then why would we separate the two of us for the last moments of life?
So considering that, we stayed in the labor and delivery ward. Sometime around 2 o'clock in the morning, baby's still alive and he pooped. And I said, hey, he had a bowel movement. Does that mean that he has a stomach? And the nurse said, no, it just means that he has intestines. So any of you who have studied biology, you would probably realize that I was correct and the nurse was incorrect, but we're not going to belabor that point. We'll move on. I said that night when, after that, I said, listen, we got to get this kid still alive. We got to get him onto an IV, even if he doesn't have a stomach. She said, well, the baby has his fat reserves for about 24 hours. You should be fine. I said, well, tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting him in IV. I don't care what's happening. She said, okay, if he survives tomorrow, we'll talk about it. Well, we woke up the next morning, the baby's still alive, and we're still alive. And, we're still not getting any communication, why we're not getting any medical care. And at, towards 12 o'clock, I'm like, okay, let's get him on an IV. And she's like, Dr. Ralph's coming back. I'm like, I don't want to see Dr. Ralph. And my mother-in-law is like, Ellie, calm down. So Ralph comes back at 1 o'clock and he starts talking. He starts talking a very more morbid tone like this. And Charachel says to him, talk louder. I can't hear you. And then he starts talking normally. He says, listen, I told you when we had when we originally spoke, that these medical issues come with bigger issues. And it seems like, we looked at the scans yesterday, it seems like your son might have something called heterotaxy, which is the internal organs could be upside down, flipped backwards, or any combination of that. So considering that, he might have a stomach. So, and this is the dumbest thing you can ever tell a Jewish mother. If you want, you can try to feed him. Now, here's a guy who's married to a Jewish woman. I don't know how he got this into his head, but basically, yes, we want to feed our child. Thank you very much. And we filled up 5 milliliters of sugar water. He drank it without a problem. I'm pretty sure he gave us a look that was kind of like, what kind of parents are you that you're trying to starve me for 24 hours? But we went up to 10 milliliters. And he drank that, no problem. So from there, we went to formula, and he's drinking formula, no problem. So obviously, he's got a stomach. He's got a functional GI system, but we're not getting him to surgery, and we couldn't figure out why. Tuesday comes, baby's still alive, and they start, Tuesday, they started to try to get us into hospice care. And we're like, no, we don't want to go into hospice care. That's not what we're trying to do. Wednesday, one of Chayrachel's old OBs, the high-risk OB, she was an interesting doctor, because, as you can probably tell from my attitude, I like cracking jokes, and I'd crack jokes in her, when she was testing my wife during the previous pregnancies, and she could never really understand those jokes. And it took 3 or 4 children before she finally realized, oh, you're joking. So I'm a very, very straight-laced person. And so she says to my wife, she says, you've been in this bed for, several days. You really need to get up and walk around. My wife says, can I walk with the baby? Now, usually when my wife gives birth to a baby, the experience has been, listen, Ellie, I've held the baby for the past 9 months. It's your turn. And that's been the process until this point. At this point, she was holding the baby very, very protective. And, I was only kind of holding the baby for an interim position for a few minutes for her to catch her breath or whatever it was. My father-in-law, I think, held him for probably about 8 seconds. I don't think it was more than that. And that was it. So she said, can I take the baby with? She says, sure, but you won't be able to leave the labor and delivery ward because of the alarm. My wife says, he doesn't have an alarm. She looks down at his leg. There's no alarm there. There's no hospital band on him. And without saying another word, she marched out. 5 minutes later, the nurse comes back in. She's typing something in on the computer. She says, kind of shrugging her shoulders, he wasn't admitted as a patient until now. So he was born Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he was finally admitted as a patient. My brother is a hospital chaplain, and I found out later why. And that's because hospitals are rated based on the life and death of patients. And so it would be easier for them to say that this child was a stillbirth than to say that it was a patient who died. So that was a pretty, shall we say, interesting, kind of, introduction into the other side of hospitals. So at this point, they really wanted us out of the labor and delivery ward. We were just taking up space. They're like, we really need the space. Please go home. Or like, we're not ready to go home. So they said, okay, we're going to send you to the neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU, not because they're going to be giving us medication, but because they need us out of the labor and delivery ward. And the neonatologist, obviously, he works with the NICU. So he was able to find us what was like an interim room, so to speak, to keep us there temporarily. So they bring us over to that room. And the nurse who had been with us during the day, the past 3 days, she brought us there. And she helps us bring all this stuff, and she's getting my wife situated, and she's kind of fluffing the pillows. And as she was fluffing the pillows, I saw her look up, and I see that her face is covered with tears. And she looks at my wife. She says, they always forget to say this in these circumstances, but I just want to tell you, congratulations, your baby's beautiful. And she hugged my wife and she walked out. And it was just this beautiful moment of humanity in this twilight zone that we were going through. And it's an important part of the story on many, many aspects. The next nurse comes in, and she's all chirpy and all, very young, bright-eyed nurse. And she introduces herself. She says, hi, my name is Danny. and she sees obviously we're Orthodox Jews. She says, "Do you know Josh Newson?" Of course, Mandy knows Josh very, very well. Josh was in our house almost every single Shabbat, many, 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 many weeks, for years, really. And he became observant in our Chabad house. So I said, "Of course we know Josh. You know, he's basically like a little brother of mine, kind of thing." Josh showed up the first night of his freshman year, first Friday night of his freshman year, with a talis. He wanted to come to our Chabad house. He wanted to daven, and he didn't know when you use the talis, when you don't use the talis, or anything like that. But he showed up with that, and he's a phenomenal guy. And today he's a doctor. Both he and his wife are doctors. Phenomenal guy. So we said, "Of course we know Josh." She said, "He's my brother." And so suddenly there was this feeling of like, maybe this is why we're here. And it was like, we're siblings here. And she was kind of surprised, I think, by how much we were kind of embracing of, not physically, of course, but just, trying to talk with her about the power of life and the power of her job being a nurse in the NICU. But she couldn't do anything medically for us. So it was just we were just massaging the baby, holding him and feeding him every 2 hours. And that was that. Next morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, I said, "We have to get the heck out of here. This is ridiculous. We're not getting anywhere." So I went to the charge nurse. I said, we're ready to go. Can you please discharge us? She says, "You have to do it. You need to get into hospice care." I said, "I don't want to be in hospice care." She said, "You have to, or else you have a police investigation." I said, "Okay, I don't want a police investigation. So fine, I'll sign in, but I don't want any of their care. I don't want their nurses. I don't want anything." She says, "Okay, sign this, sign that." She hands me a green, she hands me a bottle of morphine. She says, "Here, take this." I said, "I'm not taking morphine. What do I need it for?" She said, "Well, it's for his last moments." I said, "First of all, I was told that this is painless. First of all. Second of all, I haven't been trained to use this stuff. Third of all, I have little kids at home and I'm not going to be using it anywhere. I'm not taking it home. You can't force me to take it." She said, "Okay." She's kind of frustrated. She puts it back on the shelf. Then she hands me a green piece of paper. And now we have a really weird society in which you have certain terms that have been created to infer the exact opposite of what they are. I said, "What is this?" It says on the top, "Physician's order for life-sustaining treatment." Now, I speak English. Life-sustaining, of course, means to sustain life. That means, to correct me if I'm wrong here, to draw life onwards. And she was, I guess, not aware enough. She said, "This is a do not resuscitate form." So they have changed the name of the form from do not resuscitate to physician's order for life-sustaining treatment, which is mind-blowing. I can't get over the fact that they've done something like that, because it sounds nicer and it's not as scary or something like that. I'm not sure exactly why they did it. I said, "No, I'm not signing a post, a DNR. It's against my religion. That's absolutely against what we're trying to get in medical care." She said, "You have to." I said, "I'm not going to." She said, "Ralph is going to call you." I said, "Don't talk to Ralph." And Dr. Ralph calls us in the room and he says, "What happens if you get stopped by the cops on the way home? They're going to ask you, 'Where's your post?'" Now, getting stopped by the cops on the way home is ridiculous, because anybody who's driven a brand new baby home knows that you will never drive as slow as you do with a brand new baby. That's a fact. I'm sure it's been documented by somebody. But besides for that, we also live 10 blocks away from the hospital, 10 city blocks, and getting stopped from the university hospital to our Chabad house would basically take an incredible element of stupidity that I just, we weren't capable of doing. But in any case, I said to him, "If we get stopped by the cops, I'll tell them that we don't have the DNR because you refuse to give us treatment." And that kind of, he said, "Okay, well, you take it home, but you don't need to sign this. So thank you very much. All right, next." Now, we had not brought a car seat because either we were not going to bring the baby home or he was going to go to surgery. So everybody knows the labor delivery ward have car seats. I said, "Listen, can I borrow a car seat? I'll bring it right back." you know. And she said, you don't need a car seat. We'll write you a note. I don't know. Did she ever write us a note?
I don't know.
I don't remember. Okay. But she said she'd write us a note. At that point, I was so frustrated and ready to get out of it. I was, okay, fine. So I'm packing up and ready to go. In the meantime, our friend, the social worker, came in, and she had two things. First of all, she handed my wife a card, a green flowery thinking of you note card. And she said to my wife, inside is the phone number for the Chevra Kadisha, for the Jewish Burial Society. We thought it would be nicer for you in a pretty card. Which
Easier.
is easier for me to handle. That's so sweet. So that itself is really remarkable. And then the other thing was that there's an organization called Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. And this is an organization, a volunteer organization that takes pictures of babies that unfortunately don't make it or are not going to make it. This is not something that is part of Jewish society or perspective. And we had told them we don't want this several times, but she said, do you want Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep to come? My wife said, well, I'm alive. The baby's alive. You want to send a photographer? Go ahead. I don't care. Now, my head might have blown off if I had heard that, but we drove home slowly. We got home safely. The cops did not stop us. And I need to daven Shachris, put on my talis and tefillin, and I'm praying. The first visitor of the day is the hospice care nurse. And after I finished the Amidah, I turned around to her in full regalia and basically kind of gave her a piece of my mind. I said, if you don't mind, please, the door is that way. Finish signing those papers and get them out of my house. I was not really in a mood to entertain her. Maybe it was entertaining. I don't know. She's walking out. I just finished taking off my Rashi tefillin. For those of you who know Chabad, for us, it's not enough just to have one pair of tefillin. We have two. And I'm about to put on my second pair of tefillin. In walks the next guest of the day. And he's kind of got wild white hair. And I'm in a sarcastic mood, which is, I guess, as I am right now. And I said, oh my gosh, it's Doc Brown from Back to the Future. He said, no, I'm the photographer from Now I Lay Me Down to Sleep. I said, oh, okay. Well, do you happen to be Jewish? He says, well, in fact, I am. I said, well, would you like to put on tefillin? He said, well, if you'd allow a secular Jew to do so, I guess in Chabad, I guess we're okay with a secular Jew putting on tefillin. I guess we're fine with that. I said, actually, it would be the greatest of pleasures. And I want to say when that Jew came to put on tefillin, he was from Chicago, by the way. I describe it as the light, the house filled up with light. There was a really beautiful feeling. It was almost like the whole purpose of the hell that we had gone through until that point was so that this one Jew should put on tefillin. And it was you could feel that. It was something that was visceral. It was really special. So he put on tefillin, he took pictures. One of the pictures that he took is now on the cover of our book. And we sent him a copy of the book with an apologies with how we describe his organization in the book. It was a little bit embarrassing after the fact.
It's not his, he just volunteers.
Yes, he's just a volunteer, that's right. But in any case, that night, we're trying to figure out what to do next. And we'd just been in such a cloud. I said, well, if the baby survives to tomorrow morning, we'll start calling doctors on the East Coast. Maybe we'll be able to figure something out. Now, we had not been calling doctors before that point because we have been inundated with deaths to the point that we didn't realize that there was another access, and we didn't realize that we're going through a miracle. So next morning at 4:00 in the morning, the baby wakes up and my wife asked me to make a bottle. And thank God my wife and I have a phenomenal relationship. So I didn't screw the nipple on the bottle tight and the nipple fell off. And my wife says, you didn't screw the nipple on. I said, I'm sorry. She says, you should be. Now, well, okay. I jump out of bed. I get a towel. I try to clean up. I said, I'm sorry again. She says, you should be. The baby's wet. I'm wet. And I feel really, really bad. And I'm wide awake. And as I'm getting back into bed, I think to myself, what am I, stupid? This baby is deathly ill. I need to start making phone calls. So I got up again. I started making phone calls. I spoke to one doctor. Somebody put me in touch with a doctor who told me the following. He said, you live in Washington State. And you might know that the first state to allow assisted suicide was Washington State. You've been a victim of the right to die movement. And that was just a moment of clarity and just the weight kind of came off my shoulders, and I was able to start putting more energy into this. And finally, I thought to myself, you know what? Seattle Children's, Dr. Ralph had told us that they refused this case because it was too extreme. But maybe they'll be willing to hold him in the ICU until we find a different, surgical center that would be willing to take his case. So I called the cardiac hotline and asked them to call me back. And they called me back. She called me back at the doctor who diagnosed us called me back at exactly 9:00. It was obvious. She got into the office. She got an emergency note, call the Estrins. And she sounded really confused. And I said, listen, I know that you guys didn't want to take his case. And she goes, wait. We were told that you refused surgical care. I said, no, we were told that Seattle Children's refused his case. She said, Seattle Children's would never turn down a child. How quickly can you get here? I said, 5 minutes. The cops might stop me with 5 minutes, but yeah, all right, we can. She said, well, make it 45 minutes and pack up for the weekend because the baby's going to surgery tonight. And it was just this moment of this just incredible joy that everything turned around. There are many other details to the story. I'm not going to go into everything right now, just to give you a little bit of a picture of where he is right now, and then we can get into questions. The surgery was on Shabbat. This was Friday when we finally got him into the ICU. He was so stable. They were going to do a surgery at 10:00 that night. And Chai Rachel said to the surgeon, she's like, you guys have been in the office all day. He said, yeah. She said, can we do it tomorrow morning after you get a nap? He goes, if you want. She goes, if this is an option that my heart surgeon should get some sleep before opening up my son's chest, I think that would be a yes. So he said, sure, I'll see you tomorrow morning. And so we had a Shabbos morning. And so that first surgery they put in what was called a BT shunt to be able to allow blood flow to go between the heart and lungs. And they also fixed the total anomalous pulmonary venous return and several other elements of it as well. An incredibly successful surgery. The BT shunt later clotted at 29 days old, which resulted in a cardiac arrest, which brought us to the current circumstance the way he is right now, where he has cerebral palsy, which we assume is a result of the cardiac arrest. He was saved, and they saved him because there was a nurse there at 2:30 in the morning, and because there was a respiratory therapist in the room next door. And the details of the story are absolutely incredible. And so we are beyond blessed in terms of where he is. He is cognitively, he's completely there. He is emotionally, thank God, he's the most social kid you've ever met. He happens to be, we describe him in our book as the mascot of the shul. He still is the mascot of the shul. Now
he's the mascot of the school.
He's the mascot of the school. The school has 1,500 kids, and he's the most popular kid. It's ridiculous. He goes to therapy several days a week, and he's been pushing himself to be able to learn how to walk. He can walk with a walker. He has this bright yellow walker. We were walking in the park the other day. He's pushing this thing up a Florida incline, which is not exactly that much of an incline for Chicago and other places. And he's pushing himself up, and he's really putting the effort into it. Turns around to me with this big smile, and he goes, I'm like a Zadie, I'm like a grandpa, so that's the kind of his attitude with everything. Is really he's a very funny kid. He's a very fun loving kid. And his attitude is basically, hey, let's party. There's one more little anecdote I'm going to tell before we get off, just because I think it's such a beautiful anecdote. He was 2.5 when we decided that he actually stopped eating after his 4th heart surgery. I think it was, I lost track.
I don't know.
Somewhere around there, 4th, 5th, somewhere around there. Stopped eating completely. And so he was eating mostly through an NG tube, which is, of course, nasogastric, goes through the nose. And as he got to be 2 years old, it started coming out much more often. And I couldn't handle putting it in. My wife put it in every single time.
He always had a tube He had always had a tube for feeding. He was also eating by mouth.
Right. But it got to a point where it's really not feasible anymore. So we did a G tube, which is a hole straight into the stomach, and he's fed through that. And at the same time, we were able to give him a bris as well, which is, I guess what Jewish people do. So soon after the G tube was put in, I picked him up, and the tube connected to his feeding bag got caught onto a chair, and it pulled at his stomach. And you can imagine how painful that is. And he started crying, and he doesn't cry very often. So my wife holds him close to her chest, and he's crying for about 10, 12, 15 seconds. Then he picks up his head, he looks at us, and he goes, tears still on his face. He says, "Happy now." And that was that. And I just thought that this is such an incredible lesson for all of us, because we do have real pain and we do have real struggles, every single one of us. I don't think there's a single person on this, this group, or in any group of human beings that doesn't have pain somewhere. But when we have the ability to be able to reach into ourselves and realize that our life is truly a gift, and that's something that is something special and miraculous about it, somehow we can reach into that and just say, all right, happy now. So that in short is our story. We put it in a book. It's called of medicine, miracles, and mindsets. We sell it on our website, medicinemiraclesmindsets.com. We sell it for full price at $20. If you go to Amazon, you're welcome to give Jeff Bezos his $5, because the rumor is that he needs a new coffee machine or something like that. I do not know why he's selling it for less than cost price, but in any case, I hope that the book, which has part of it, also includes some of our kind of crisis tips and crisis management tips, as well as tips in terms of dealing with people who are going through crisis, the things that we learned from our experience that we tried to give to people, so that it's not just our kind of, as my wife said, spilling our guts on paper. It has a little bit more than that. So that's our story. I hope you enjoy, and of course, I hope you also see through our sarcasm that we're happy to be here and answer any questions that you might have, and hopefully open up the floor. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We are actually going to give people a little taste of Nissi today. There was a short documentary that was made about Nissi's story recently, and we're going to show a little clip of a little bit of the joy that Nissi experiences and brings today.
What's your name? What's your full name?
Nisana.
And what's your nickname?
Ah.
What does everybody call you?
Nissi.
Nissi what?
Nissi Estrins.
Nissi is an incredibly happy kid. He really takes everything that happens to him with a sense of humor and just kind of laughs it all off. He gets a kick out of absolutely everything. Somehow, from deep inside himself, he realizes that his life is truly a gift.
Nis, tell me what you did in therapy today.
I was walking back my...
You were walking by yourself?
No.
Almost? Did you do sidestepping?
So basically, I was standing up,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and there was a ladder.
Uh-huh.
So I was going forward to the door.
Really? You were walking to the door?
Yeah.
Do you work so hard and try so hard? And you always are smiling about it and happy about it? Does that make me so proud and Tati? And one day you're gonna learn how to walk? It's gonna be awesome. Yay. Good job.
I'm inspired. I don't know about you guys. Okay, we actually have several questions that came in, so I do want to get started because there could be someone else who wants to, like I said, be brave and ask you on screen. Firstly, did you come across any other medical staff that were more on your side?
Answer questions
go.
because you spoke so much. Okay. We just didn't split it up because we find like it gets a little bit, you get out of rhythm when one person starts speaking to the next person. So we just did it this way because you follow the flow. So I do know the story too. Once we switched to Seattle Children's, the team was completely on our side. I'm not sure how much that was because they were so horrified by the treatment we were given before. And then we did two surgeries in Boston. For the most part, yes, I would say that we're a little bit wary of people that have a little bit too much of an attitude. So, but now we're not scared to kind of step up and advocate. And then our team in Miami has been amazing as well. So for the most part, yes, I think that he's proven to everybody that they shouldn't give up.
How did you remain strong for your other children?
So we weren't always strong, but we did make a commitment once we got the diagnosis and, it was confirmed after the first week, and we sort of made a plan that we had to prioritize what was going to be most important to us. And we felt very strongly that our family was going to be priority over our chabados and our work and everything else. So we really and even within our family, it was the emotional well-being, not all the extra stuff like, dinner from all food groups or making sure homework was done or whatever. We kind of put that. So we really tried to do that. We did speak to professionals. We did reach out to friends and family, which I would say for the first 5 minutes felt uncomfortable. But once we shared, we gained so much that it was worth, the uncomfortableness of it. And I strongly suggest when people are going through something, if you can share it, most people want to help you. They might not always say the right thing, but they do want to help you. And, we're lucky to live in a community and in a society where people want to care. And I mean, that's what Friendship Circle is all about. So, so that was really, we tried, we did the best we could, different stages in our life, different stages at different times, where we made different decisions, but that was the overall mindset that we had.
Okay, this one is for you, Chai Rachel. As a mother who had just given birth, how did you deal emotionally with such a traumatic experience?
So, like Ellie said, the first few days, I really didn't let anybody touch him. And it was very hard those first few days until we got him into surgery. Like there was nothing we could do. And all we could do was hold him. And I was terrified that I had never seen someone die before, thankfully. And I was really, really scared. But it was like literally moment by moment, like there was nothing we could do. So what could we do? Just hold him and just hope the next moment comes and he's still here. I remember going to sleep and waking up and thinking like, I hope he's still alive in the morning, which is really horrible. Once he got into surgery, I think my mama bear flared up and I became much more of an advocate and much more of a protector, and my adrenaline and all that. And I was going to the hospital every day, and, now I'm trying to recover from that.
We're hoping that
6 years later.
We're hoping that eventually she gets, what do you call it?
Maternity leave.
Yeah, maternity leave, exactly.
I did not get maternity leave.
Okay. We have a Jewish law question. How were you allowed to name him before he had his bris?
Excellent question.
I know the rule too, just because you grew up.
You're welcome to tell it.
You can say it, but I just want to say that I know the
yes,
rule.
well, not only that, you should also say why you chose the name.
Okay, fine. Sorry.
Go for it.
Okay, so when I was pregnant, we reached out to some friends. Well, actually, Ellie did a lot of the emotional legwork, and I just listened. But he reached out to some friends who had a child who had hydrocephalus and didn't survive more than a few hours of birth. So he reached out to them and said, like, what did you do? How did you support your wife? What did you do with your kids? And we sort of made a plan before Nissi was born. So one of the things that they said is they chose a name for the baby. Some communities have a tradition that the parents don't choose a name for a baby that doesn't live past a few hours or doesn't survive birth at all. And it's just, I don't know if it's less traumatic, whatever, less connection building. I'm not sure exactly all the spiritual reasons. It's not a rule. It's just a tradition. But they said that they chose to name the baby. The mother wanted to name the baby. So I thought about that a lot. I spent a lot of hours sitting on the couch thinking and not being able to do anything when I was pregnant during those last 10 or 9 weeks. And I thought about at one point, like, what name would I want to give this child? and I thought about the name. Well, we were hoping it was a girl because we had 2 boys above, but we didn't know. So I was thinking of the name Netanya or Netanel, which means God gives, because I wanted to feel that this is from God, even though I didn't necessarily feel it. That was like my goal. That was my mission statement. So that was the name we had thought about. We didn't know if we were going to use it. It was just sort of like a name. And then after he was born, the rabbi who Ellie had spoken with came to visit us like within the first 24 hours. Like, baby was born Monday. I think he came Tuesday morning. So Ellie said, we chose a name. Can we use it? So he's like, you can call your baby whatever you want. It's just the nickname. So we started using the name, and we were debating about Netanel or Nisanel, Ashkenazic or Sephardic. And then we said, if we call him Nisanel, we can nickname him Nissi, my miracle, which is what we're hoping for. At that point, it was just a dream. It was a hope. And then once he went into surgery and he was stable, right? Yeah. At a month old,
Yeah.
right? At a month old. So there's a certain halachic, at a month, the first 30 days of a child's life, they're not considered there's different laws in terms of if a child dies within the first 30 days of burial and shiva and stuff like that. Once a child hits a 30-day mark, it's considered like
Viable.
Thank you. So after 30 days, we named him the way you name a girl, the Torah, like you call him Mishaberach, and we named him the same way. Happened to be, we did it right after the cardiac arrest, was it? Once he survived that, we said we want to give him his name like the real way. So that's what we did. And then when he had his bris, we could have added a name if we wanted, but at that point we just didn't feel like, we just wanted to keep his name the way it was. So that's the long-winded short answer.
Does your son know his story?
When we tell it in front of him, he goes, "That's me." I don't know, obviously, how much he understands about it. You had a conversation with him recently about his zipper.
Yeah, I don't know how much he knows. We try not to traumatize him, but I feel like at this point he's 6, and like we should tell him some of it. So he knows he knows that the doctors fixed his heart, but like, does he know the full story? No. My other kids know it way too well and roll their eyes every time we start. So he knows, I don't know. And I say with any special needs kid, how much do they know that they're different? How much do you explain to them? How much do you let them just figure it out? It's a little bit of that sort of thing as well,
How old was Nissi when he came home from Seattle Children's?
Which time? No, he came home at like right after Pesach, so he was like what, 3 months, and he went back within 24 hours, and then he had another heart surgery, and then he came home like at 5 or 6 months.
Okay, this is good for our crowd. Some people on this chat, may or may not be raising children with a disability. So once you got past the beauty of the miracle, and that excitement had, so to speak, worn off, how do you deal with raising a child with special needs on a day-to-day basis?
How much time do we have?
Well, we are currently either for parents with special needs kids. So things are great. Our kids are home and we're by ourselves on vacation. It's hard. I think there are days which are, it's hard. We were definitely in denial for a while.
About the cerebral
palsy. Yeah. And I think that you have to take one day at a time and cut yourself a lot of slack and say, I'm just doing the best I can. And that's all I can do. And try to create as much support as you can for you, for your family, for your child. I just heard a beautiful thing. I was listening to a talk about that someone was talking to special needs kids. Ellie, chime in if you want to say something.
Go ahead, Will.
And he said that children with special needs were not brought into the world to fix themselves. They don't have to fix themselves. They're perfect, but they came in the world to fix everyone around them. And I just thought that was so beautiful, because we all know that even children who are nonverbal and in a vegetative state, even if they don't interact with us, which is like the most extreme we would say, they change the people around them just by causing us to be caring, compassionate, mindful of the value of life, all these things just by their being. how much more so a child that, we know a lot of special needs kids that really are the light of, their family and are really have special souls, and you see it through their faces and their eyes and stuff like that. But it's not easy.
And along with that, I just want to correct that the miracle is not worn off, because we're very, very well aware that he shouldn't be. He's technically speaking, he is quadriplegic, so it has quadriplegic cerebral palsy because all 4 of his limbs are impacted. So the fact that he does function with all of his 4 limbs is miraculous. The fact that he is cognitive, not just somewhat understanding, but is absolutely the peanut gallery in any conversation that's going on. If I drive a different way to school, he will correct me in half a second. Like he's just fully aware of everything that's going on. All of those things are obvious miracles. So that miracle has not worn off. But at the same time, that doesn't change the stress and the amount of exhaustion that just simply comes from the fact that we have so much work to do. That doesn't change. So I mentioned this, we're at this retreat, and I mentioned this morning when each one of us were introducing to each other and telling a little bit of our story. I didn't tell this whole story to everybody. I just told the encapsulated version, the diagnosis and the prognosis and the fact where he is right now. I said, we are fighting the stress and exhaustion with our appreciation and thanks. And then Charachel and I, were checking in with each other at lunch, and she said almost the exact same thing to the women. So that's we have this constant balance, and it's a constant, it's a constant thing. It's not even.
We don't have the answers. I'm really sorry.
It really is a continuous effort, because it's also a lifetime. This is, everybody says, "Oh, how's he doing nowadays?" Expecting to hear, "Oh, he's a brand new heart and he has a brand new," and well, thank God he's phenomenal, but he's complex, and so therefore our life is simply not as simple as.
But I think like coming up with little mindsets that keep you going are really important. One day at a time. You're doing a great job. All these little things that you can tell yourself, or, God cares about me and he gave me this child because, I have the ability, or whatever things that give you encouragement, I think are important to just, at least for me, those are the things that the little messages.
Focusing on the miracle. That's a good one. That's a great takeaway for everyone. These are fantastic questions. Anyone else? Last call, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the Estrins anything.
Nassan El Yosef. Nice. Don't be afraid. We don't usually bite.
Not over the screen anyway.
That's right.
Can't bite you through Zoom. I'll give you one more second, because I know people are always kind of like, should I not? Is someone else going to do it?
The name of the book is Of Medicine, Miracles, and Mindsets.
I can type that in.
Oh, perfect. We're on a phone here, so type difficult.
Speaking of, it's time for the raffle. Oh, there's more.
I'm pediatric. What was that? Hang on a second.
Sorry.
Hang on a second. Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Aviva, for working with people. And there we go. Kitty.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's time for the raffle. Speaking of the book, not just an autographed copy, but a personalized copy. Do you have to be present to win?
I need to point out that Nissi autographed it as well.
Oh, come on.
That's so it's
So he tried.
yeah. So there's 2 versions. So you see a bunch of pencil written on both sides of the cover. The first was version 1, and then he's like, I need to do it again. So if you're wondering why I scribbled on, you should know that's a very valuable autograph.
Okay, I don't have a hat. I was gonna say I'm literally pulling a name out of a hat. I don't have a hat, but I have all this stuff in here. Dun, 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 dun. Drum roll, please. Mel Weisberg. Are you on here? If not, we know where to find you. We'll track you down. Oh, guys, you're muted. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. This was amazing. It's always important to keep perspective. I think that's also a good thing to focus on, right? Like there's always something to be grateful for. There's always something to not be grateful for. And it really just chooses, it's about you choosing what to focus on. So thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you again to the Estrins for sharing your story, for sharing a little bit of Nissi with us.
Thank you for.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Everyone have a good night and go buy their book.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.